Hello and welcome to the Foria YouTube channel where we get to interview incredible people and give you amazing advice for your sex life, your intimacy, your love, your relationships, all of it. I am Kiana Reeves. I'm the Chief Intimacy Officer here at Foria, and I'm a somatic sex educator and work in the realms of embodiment and intimacy. And I'm here today with Elizabeth Ashford, who I would love for you to introduce yourself before we dive into all of our juicy questions. And we're going to have an amazing conversation today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. My name's Elizabeth Ashford, and I'm the founder of Beyond the Beez, and Beez with a Z. And it's a sexual education platform where we have our own e-commerce shop, our own products, and we've really been focusing on we started from a blog perspective, but we've moved into workshops and really doing speaking and educational kind of coaching sessions. So we moved into that sphere, but we have a lot of free resources on our website as well. So that's kind of where we are today.
Awesome. And everyone always wants to know, how did you get into the world of sex and intimacy and relationships? What brought you here personally?
I feel like everyone's it's such a niche area and it's such a funny thing because there's no one that, for me, there's no one that inspired me to be in this space because I didn't know anyone. I didn't grow up with anyone in this industry, and I think that's common for a lot of people. But I think for me, I had always been interested in the space, always loved talking about sex, all those things, loved learning about it. My whole life I've been like that. And then I was going to go into sexual assault prevention work when I was in college. And then it was so funny. I did the whole application, couldn't press send. And I just knew that I wasn't the person for that job. Especially back when I was 19, 20, if someone was coming to me with something like that, I just want to cry with them rather than being this amazing peer educator that I wanted to be. I just wasn't there yet. So I wanted to keep doing work in that space, but I ended up going the sex positive lens, which is the same thing. We're kind of moving at the same thing, but with a different lens.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like it's so often that people enter this space because they want to help, right?
Yes.
Because if there's a part of their life where they're like, this is really important to me. That makes sense. So you've taken this passion for sexuality and for intimacy and you've turned it into a profession, which is so exciting because it feels right when someone loves what they do.
Mm-hmm.
When someone's really like, this matters to me. And so I'd love to hear what are topics that you're educating about? What are subjects that clients and people are coming to you for that you really feel like you get to make a difference in people's lives?
So many different angles. And I think what's been interesting about our business, and it's hard too, because I think obviously a lot of businesses, you want to tailor your specific market. And one of the biggest focuses in the way we've tailored is because I was just listening to my community, and there's so much the orgasm gap situation going on and pleasure gap between people, specifically heterosexual couples. So I have such a soft spot for that discussion. And then obviously where we are politically is another portion of the world where I'm consistently fired up.
Yeah.
Trans rights and LGBTQ rights. And then back to, having to find a pinpoint for a business. It's a weird thing because you have to be able to walk before you can run. And to me, the running is sort of the long-term desire and the pleasure gap in the political sphere. So if I'm able to do that, I'm able to do the walking as well. And the walking is sort of the sex ed for teens. And we have a class like Birds and Bees for really young kids. And if we can get in at that stage, it's so amazing because it can really help remove a lot of the shame that people often experience throughout their life. So there's so many passion points, but yeah, it kind of changes by day in terms of what information I'm being fed or what someone's asking. Kind of depends.
Yeah, I love that you're educating kids and teens too, because there's such a lack of, I was actually talking about this the other day, is that our sexual experiences are layered onto each other. It's not just we have our young sexual experiences and then as we're an adult, we have this totally mature relationship with our sexuality. We often enter in our teen years with zero roadmap, not a lot of guidance, how to navigate the joys and challenges of our bodies and relating. And then what happens is we come into teens and 30s and are getting into long-term relationships and long-term sexual partnerships. And we just do not have the tools. And we're basically relating in the same way we did when we were teenagers, but in an adult body. And so a lot of habit and a lot of pattern form in these long-term relationships, which is where, Foria works with people around desire and around libido and around ways of keeping intimacy fresh and alive and active, because that is the thing that couples are running into so frequently. They they wake up 2, 3, 4 years into a relationship and all of the crazy chemicals are kind of like diminishing, and you realize like you are responsible for keeping the flame and the spice and the excitement alive,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm curious, like when you work with couples, what are you seeing? Because let's go here. Let's talk about the orgasm gap. It's most prominent for heterosexual couples. It's most prevalent, but when people hear it, like, what does it actually mean? Can you describe it for us?
Yeah, I think what burns the fire in me the most is that when we think about this gap, men, when we think about sex in general, we're really focusing on penis and a vagina until a man finishes. And that is not inclusive. Obviously, we're missing a whole portion of human beings. And then when you take it back to actual heterosexual couples, where that is what they do, foreplay is like the quick 2-minute situation. And then we blame women for being, less sexually, interested as the years go on. But
Or
men are
taking
the
too long.
ones
Yeah, or
men
taking
are
too
the
long.
ones that are orgasming the most. Like it's usually what 90% of the men and 56% of the women. And then we wonder why women are kind of not as interested. And it's such a frustrating thing because I think women are more sexual. I think we obviously are multi-orgasmic. We can experience so many more orgasms in our life than a man can because we don't have the refractory time frame. So the opportunity of what we could experience is so much actually higher. And we treat women's orgasms like it's this mystical thing that's hard to achieve, and it's not hard to achieve. It's just this formula that we've created doesn't work, and it's built for the man. And I think that to me is where that's been such a focus. And then when I think about couples as a whole, again, I just feel like it comes also in like small moments with friends. I'm like on a walk with a friend, and they just got engaged, and they're like, oh, like, my sex life, my sexual desire is kind of already on its way out. And there doesn't seem to be, it seems to be both a disappointment, but there doesn't seem to be a way that they know how to fix it. Obviously, I'm there to try to help and guide, but I think women do feel like it's like their fault, and it's not. And I think that's where my fire comes from.
With so many places we could go with that. So the discrepancy between how frequently men are orgasming inside of heterosexual relationships and how often women are orgasming inside these dynamics is a lot. It's like 40% discrepancy when we look at the studies. And you talked about the blueprint or the kind of like recipe that most people think is what's needed to help either themselves or help their partners reach orgasm if they're women. If you were to like give me like a one sentence, like what do you think most people think it takes? The average heterosexual couple is like, you gave it a little bit, but I think it's like this starts with making out. And then, like what's this little timeline that most people think is like the thing that happens?
Of what sex is. Yeah, I feel like it's like a 2-minute makeout, maybe a little longer if you're like in college and it's new and it's exciting, and then it's like 5 minutes at most of foreplay at most, and then it's maybe 5 minutes of intercourse, which ends with him finishing. And I think I just gave actually too much time. I would imagine it's more truncated.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at women like you unsexual little wives, you guys are, you're boring, and it's all these things, all the ways that we diminish women for not enjoying that. But when you really look at it, it's like, how could you possibly enjoy that?
Yeah. And it's really, I think that you're right. There's this cultural narrative around women being less sexual or losing their desire. And then both people end up frustrated. It's very clearly both people's responsibility inside of a relationship to claim their desire, to state what they need, to reach in and really grow this part of their relationship, tend to it like a garden, because nobody wants, we'll say it like this, like no one wants to eat the same meal all the time.
Right.
So you got to learn to cook together, and like your partner might like certain ingredients and like you might like certain ingredients, and like how do you meet each other and bring these ingredients and these desires so that each meal that you experience together is fresh.
Love it.
I'm curious what in that dynamic then what you think is needed.
So this is not a product plug, but I'm just going to explain the product I built because I really felt like it was, and why I built it the way I did. So we have a card game, and the way that I built it out was learn, think, act. And the two that I really want to highlight is learn and act, because there's a lot of ways. There's so many books or, tips and tricks you can read and be like, try this position and this thing and this thing. And those are all really helpful. But I think step one is the education piece. Make sure you kind of understand, like, that even what we just talked about, that formula and why it doesn't work. And then you can start thinking about, okay, maybe learn a bit more about women's pleasure as a whole, and make sure you know that maybe it can take often 15 to 20 minutes of continuous stimulation for a female to finish. So then once you kind of have those tools, and then you start introducing acts into the mix, and something like, if you were using ours, you would have our acts, but the goal is always to be able to leave those acts behind, and be able to really use your brain, which is the biggest sex organ, and the education that you've gained that we've obviously missed out on because it's not normally taught. Pleasure isn't taught in any sort of system that I've seen. So that's sort of how I thought to break it down and to try to change the way we're doing this. So yeah, education, and then putting it into action.
Right. So it's like opportunities for bite-sized bits of education where people don't have to relearn the entire script, because so many couples are running this body-mind habit, and maybe they're able to think and understand that their partner, needs 20 or 40 minutes, or that I need 20 to 40 minutes to become fully aroused. But then in practice, what you do to actually use that time and allow it to not feel like pressure, or like something that has to happen. It's like, I take 20 minutes. So like now it's 20 minutes of foreplay, which is not going to turn anyone on. It's like that opportunity for couples or for people to self-explore what can fill that amazing, like what can help you blossom open, essentially. All right, new background, new room, new background, new Wi-Fi. I won't go with that. Yeah, so let's dive into, what do you see are the most common misconceptions about the female body, and what do you wish everyone knew?
Oof, that's a good question. I think this brought me back to just one moment that I had in college. I went to Harvard, and obviously people, claim that as being the smartest people, obviously, and there's so many things about that it's twisted in a way that we've created this system. But even being in that atmosphere, I'll never forget one of my friends my senior year had no idea where her clitoris was. No idea. Never really heard the word. And I was like, damn, like,
Never
even
heard the
in an
word.
atmosphere where people think it's the smartest people in the world, and we've done everything we can to, kill the SAT and kill this and this and this, we don't even know about our own body. And that's so not to fault her. But I think the misconception is that this is everywhere. It's so pervasive in terms of how we understand ourselves, our bodies, and really understanding that obviously the brain is the biggest sex organ, and knowing that has to be like nurtured to be able to have really interesting and great sex past just the physicality of it all. So that's my first thought. I think most people are missing an ingredient. And that's, I guess, to also build on that, when I graduated, people were often saying to me, like, they were hearing what I was doing, I was like, oh, I already know everything there is to know about sex. And you're like, you are my target audience. You are like, it's that misconception. And it's also possibly a fear of being, not that sexual. And maybe you don't want to admit that you don't know things, but we're going to be changing and evolving for the rest of our lives. So sexual education is just, a toolkit to help you move in those sexual ups and downs that, again, will exist for forever.
So good. Yeah, it's really important. Super, super, super important. Do you have any tips, like a holistic tip for if someone was like, okay, I want to start here, I want to improve you could call it sexual well-being, or you could say like your relationship with your own sexual expression and permission and your relationship with your body. Like what's one tip where you're like, yeah, that's the one that will really change people's lives?
Can I go into a thought of what not to do and then go into it?
Sure. Yeah.
So when I think about things that like light me up, this week, there was one of my content creators I actually really love made a video all about how, your man shouldn't be watching porn. And it bothered me because that's another pervasive thought that often, especially in hetero relationships, the way we talk to people, especially women, is how to keep your partner, how to keep your man interested. And it adds more things. Like, it just makes you feel like you need to be doing more and more and more and more and more.
Totally.
And when I heard that, I was just like, okay, so what not to do to benefit your sex life is that limiting aspect. Removing porn's, it's not really doing it's fine, unless obviously there's that percentage of people that maybe it's a problem for them. It's so far and few between. Porn is an educational resource for young kids. I understand that, conversation. But when we think about, exploring ourselves and exploring our fantasies, there's so many fantasies that we actually really do want to keep in our brain, and your partner can't do everything, for the rest of your life. This concept of choosing one person and being sexually satisfied for the rest of your life, to me, is a myth. So you have to, so I think what not to do is don't try to like pull these things away. What to do is allow that sense of freedom. One of my favorite people talks about this is Esther Perel. Obviously, the paradox of intimacy, and that sense of like closeness can be really like the killer of your sexual desire, and obviously stacking up those rules as well. And what you want to do is remind yourself that it's a choice, and that just because you're together doesn't mean everyone else is dead, and porn shouldn't exist because they can't look at other women, and there's not other hot, like there's a hot girl walking on the street, like he, if you're with a guy and you're heterosexual, like he probably thought, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful, and that's like so fine. People can be beautiful, and so are you. So I think it's sort of introducing energy to flow and using sex toys. And if you want to, explore different fantasies, I think porn can be a really great resource for couples. If you're like, oh my gosh, what is XYZ thing? Let's go watch it. Let's see how we feel about it. It can be a good way, a good stepping stone. So yeah, overall, I think it's just breathing into it a little more, and having the conversations where, you are choosing each other, and other methods can be a part of, that sexual experience you have together.
Yeah, what I hear you saying in there really specifically that sounds important is that instead of creating limitations, which is really different than boundaries.
Mm,
Limitations are created through fear, and like
yes.
it's a fear response. Boundaries are when we have a clear, like, actually, that's not right for me.
Mhm.
So instead of creating limitations, open to curiosity and sharing and exploring your own inner erotic world, and allowing your partner to explore their own inner erotic world, so that when the two meet, there's like freshness that you both can share with each other.
He's so good. You can do it in one sentence.
I synthesized it. But I mean, there's so much in there that you said that's important, right? It's not porn itself, it's how you use porn,
Mhm.
right? It's not the thing itself that's the problem, it's your response to it. Like the beautiful girl walking down the street isn't the problem. The problem is how we respond. I'm as a jealous person, like this is
Exactly.
something I work with. So how do I respond? Also, how does my partner respond?
Right.
And like, how do I let my partner know how I'm feeling and give him the space to let me know how he's feeling.
Mhm.
So I love that. I think that's so great.
So I think couples therapy is huge. I think everyone should do it.
Yeah, couples therapy for sure. So on the note of couples therapy, what are some ways that couples or you assist and support your clients in having open communication about these sensitive topics? Do you have any great ways where people can be like, "Oh, I can use that in my communication to help us?"
Oh, that's a good question. I think when it comes to communication, it's just like it's normalizing sort of, to me, it's just normalizing that one person that you picked, if you are in a monogamous experience, will not be the solution for forever, for the rest of your life. Like I think we've unfortunately created a crazy expectation that when you're in your 20s, you're supposed to find your perfect person, get married, be together for forever, be fulfilled and happy for forever. So I think the one thing I always communicate is there are, like I mentioned this before, but the ups and downs. It's funny because we look at our lives and we know if we're happy right now, we know that won't last for forever, and that's depressing. And we don't always think like that, but there will be bad times, and there'll be good times and bad times, and your sex life is the exact same. So I think it's just making sure people are aware that when they're not feeling their partner, or they're not feeling aroused or excited or anything like that, that's so normal, and there's ways to get around that. So it's just opening up the reality of life, to me, is always like step one.
Yeah, like authenticity and
Yeah,
real vulnerability so that you can know where each other are at. I love that.
exactly. And then you can kind of figure out how to help people not take it as rejection.
Mhm.
'Cause some partners can be like, well, they don't want me. And it's like, it probably isn't you. There's so many contextual things that might be going on in someone's life, all that stuff. So you can really then dive
Yeah.
into the specifics. But
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So Foria products,
mm,
you know them and love them. What's your favorite? One or two favorites, and how do you support people in getting to know them?
luckily, I'm really not just saying this. I love Foria, and I have a lot of your products.
Mm,
And you're one of the only brands I've used that's not like a sex toy base that I've actually emptied the bottle
that's
of the
great.
body oil. Emptied it, love it.
Yeah.
Need to get a new one because it's very non-sticky, but you feel like good. Because sometimes you may put oil on, you can't like get on your bed and you can't do, I feel like there's none of that exists when I use the body oil.
Yeah.
So
Love
those are
that
great. And
so
then as
much.
suppositories, I always love like either just talking about those. I think that's like a
Mhm.
product that not a lot of people know of. So it's always a fun one to talk about. But those are my two like standouts.
Yeah, the intimacy melts.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that product for couples in particular
Mm.
because when we're talking about this heterosexual dynamic where there is a focus on penetrative sex,
Hmm.
a lot of times because women take, 20 to 40 minutes to reach that real peak arousal, those
Hmm.
internal arousal beds like the G spot and the cervix and the AFE zone, like all of this highly innervated tissue isn't even filled with blood yet
Hmm.
because it hasn't been long enough. And so the intimacy melts really can help with that internal arousal and relaxation and make penetrative sex feel really, 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 really pleasurable. So I think they're one
And
of
the
our,
packaging is beautiful.
yeah, it
And
is.
it's good kind of gender neutral. It's like not
Yeah.
too, it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I love that. Is there anything else that you want to share about your work and your world that you'd want our audience to know about, the impact and your mission?
That's a really good question. What else about VTBs? We're doing obviously really focusing on the workshop space and really wanting it's a hard balance to play. And I'm sure you feel this in the industry as well of really wanting to get the words out there and get your information out there, but we are so deeply shadow banned. So it is so frustrating trying to put content out and get people to see it. Or my thing that I hate the most is I want to be able to like speak and like use the word clitoris and use the word sex, because I'm working in sexual health. But if you post TikToks, you have to really kind of limit yourself. So maybe one thought is if you ever see us kind of looking like we're muzzled and we're not saying something that we mean, we're not afraid of the words. We're in a place right now where it's hard to be able to get everything you want out. So maybe just interacting with any, sexual educators content, if you see it, is always helpful, or really finding a way to support the people in this space, because I think we're obviously reaching a time where it's so needed, and especially for trans and LGBTQ plus, and past my business just to any business, it's just people need the extra support and love right now. So that'd be my thought on
Yeah,
business, on business related.
I think that's great. So grateful that you joined us. So grateful to have this conversation with you. My last question is, let's say a couple wants to like go home tonight and they want something new that's going to like spark something cool for them, create deeper intimacy or just bring that sense of like thrill into the dynamic. What would you say is something that they could try that's easy to access?
I think doing like a 10, maybe 15, I don't want to scare people with times, but sometimes a 10-minute experience where there's no penetration, especially for in a hetero, is allowed, and really forcing yourself to lengthen out those experiences. If you're not in a heterosexual relationship, obviously you can already experience this stuff without doing penetration. So I think really trying to do 10-minute foreplay session is, at least I would obviously say 15, 20, but you don't want to like freak people out. So I start with 10. And if you already are used to 10, then try 20, whatever you're used to. And then another thing that may sound basic to some people, but for some reason is obviously very stigmatized to other, is using lube. I think
Mm,
10 out of 10 times use lube. It's just, if your experience is at a 90%, lube will just take it to that 100. It's just the easiest little additive that always makes things better. So those would be my two.
love it so much. Such great advice. Really, really glad to have you here. Thank you for just sharing your wisdom and your mission and your excitement and your thoughts on all these subjects. It really matters in people's lives. So thank you again. And thanks to all of you at home for joining us and learning with us and going on this exploration.
Thank you so much.